Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Happy Wednesday. I am so grateful and happy to be here with you once again on Wisdom Wednesdays. Today is going to be a really special day as we sit down with yet another social justice and social impact leader as we talk about how we pursue our passions, how we pursue our purpose while also preserving our well being. These conversations are really about normalizing these types of conversations and nurturing spaces so we can continue to keep ourselves whole as we do the work that we deeply care about. And as we exist in a world that holds the word, the written word, to the highest degree, these conversations are deeply intended to honor our ancestors who have shared wisdom through storytelling and being in community. So this space is for all of us and all of you who are learners that grow by doing, by listening, and by visualizing. I welcome you all, and I am excited to be here with you in community. I am Manuela Contreras, she, her, ella, and I am your host for today. I am the founder and chief inspiration officer of Confuerza Experiences, and as a leader and business strategy consultant, facilitator, and experience creator, I started Confuerza so leaders can exist in a world where we can live in harmony with pursuing our purpose and preserving our well-being. I am a Latina woman with caramel skin, brown wavy hair, with brown eyes, and today I am wearing my brown glasses and I am wearing my gold yellow shirt here with a green cardigan. And have my black headsets on so you can listen to me a little sharper today. And I am standing in front of a cream Zoom background with eucalyptus branches on the left and the Con Fuerza experience on the right and the hashtag Wisdom Wednesday title. So as you get settled into our space today, I like to just share a few reminders of how to engage with us. This is a LinkedIn Live event, so I do like to let folks know that if you like to have the closed captionings available and on while you're watching, that you can do that on the right-hand side at the bottom bar. Usually they come up automatically, but if they don't, encourage you to turn those on if that is supportive to you. You'll also notice that you can connect with us using the comment section below, but if you want to message and ask an anonymous question, feel free to private message me and I'll be attentive of my LinkedIn messages. I like to also acknowledge that we're still in a virtual environment and life sometimes likes to life. And so if at any point we have a technology that our technology fails or that we are looking around for our notes, just know that we are still fully present and here with you today. And last thing I like to acknowledge before we get started is that we want to be clear that everything that we mention here, advice, are all to sharing advice and diverse perspectives. However, neither of us nor our professional mental health professionals, and this is not a substitute to any professional medical advice or a one size fits all. So please know that this is a place for you to hopefully encourage and inspire you for deeper reflections about the practices that are or are not working for you so you can continue to find what works best for you. Wonderful. Well, thank you for listening and being here with me. Something I like to do on our calls that I think make this space a little bit special is start off with a grounding somatic practice. For those of you who are just joining our space, somatic practices are really about connecting to our mind and our body. And so we've done a few different types of exercises, and today we want to do something a little bit different. Our wonderful guest is an incredible writer and has been sharing beautiful poetry for many years now. And so we're going to be doing a grounding visualization, and you'll be hearing both of our voices throughout that visualization. And so I'm going to invite all of you that are here with us today or listening at the recording for you to just start getting present in your body and getting present in your seat. If that means putting your feet flat on the ground, maybe your hands in a place that feel comfortable, either on your heart or on your lap, and really get grounded and fully seated in your place. And as you're getting grounded and seated in your place, if you feel comfortable, to slowly close your eyes and really be fully present in your body. As you close your eyes, you start focusing on your breath, breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. With every breath, connecting more to your body and getting grounded to the ground below us. And as you become fully present here in this moment, I want to invite you to visualize entering a garden. Imagine a fresh, open garden in front of you. And as you step and imagine yourself stepping into this garden, stepping into the soil, as you notice and smell or see the colors around you of the different parts of this garden, you ground yourself here and you start to slow down and sit right in the middle of the garden. And in this moment, as you're fully sitting here, taking in the smells, the colors, the sensations, you hear a voice.
Soul. We must reconcile with the souls that have been tortured on these lands. Each tear, each pained groan has embedded itself into the soil to sprout the seeds of hatred and fear that are picked up in the crevices and corners of our souls as we brush past. Unless we heal our land and through it ourselves, we are doomed to sow the same stories to be harvested anew with each generation. With our breath, our bodies, our minds, and our hearts, we must strive to overturn the soil so that the dark moments of our past can be brought into the light and held for a reckoning. Otherwise, the wounds of our past continue to fester until we succumb to rot. These last few months have hastened the painful journey to uncover, to open, to reveal. And with it, we have come face to face with our worst selves. We are tempted to hide from truths revealed, but we must remain steadfast in our gaze. As we sow the earth with reconciliation and lay to rest our lesser selves, we can begin the work of embracing our wholeness, with which we can finally achieve the unimaginable, the undreamed, the unknown.
As you take in these words, you take in this beautiful poem, sit in your body and notice the thoughts, the emotions, and the feelings that are present. Take a deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. Release. Slowly bow your head down. And when you are ready, slowly open your eyes so you're the first thing that you see when you join us back to be fully present here. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for those of you that engaged in our practice, in this special practice together, or that are taking the time to do this later for yourself. Once again, I want to welcome you to Wisdom Wednesdays. Today we're having a special conversation to honor Juneteenth. We're going to be welcoming an incredible guest in just a moment. But before we get started, I just want to acknowledge a few things. I very much acknowledge that I am a non-Black leader in this space. And so my role today isn't to take up space, but to really sit back, listen, and to be able to reflect and learn more about the lived experience of our wonderful guest here today. I want to acknowledge, as I shared earlier in my post on LinkedIn, that I usually do not have events on specific days because I do not believe that we need to just honor and talk about these topics on one specific day, that this is important for us to honor and talk about this throughout the year. As we want to be conscious and intentional and whole leaders, it means how we are cognitive of creating supportive spaces for Black leaders all year round. And also the dualities of life very much exist, and this day is also very special and can come with a lot of reflection for us to acknowledge and learn. And so I'm excited to sit and welcome Donita into our space so she can share a bit about her wisdom, her reflections, and her stories with us so we can continue to grow and evolve as leaders. So welcome, Donita. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi, Manuela, and thank you so much for creating this space for all of us, but especially for me as we think about what this day means to us, how to work through it. My name is Donita Volkwijn. My pronouns are she and her. I am a brown woman, and my curly Black hair is slicked back because we're having a heat event in Brooklyn. I'm wearing a black shirt with greenish jewelry. I'm also wearing black glasses with silver accents and a cheeky red lip. My background is blurred. We tried to get the beautiful Wisdom Wednesdays background for me as well, but I just looked very wavy, and we thought that that might be a little distracting. So
Yes,
it's just
thank
blurred.
you. Yeah, and that's okay because we're human and we exist and we make it work. So wonderful, Donita. Thank you for grounding us and sharing a bit about you and your presence here with us today. I want to start off as we do with all of our guests. I want to hear from you about your journey, really what brought you here and what of your personal and professional journey has brought you to where we are today.
Thank you for that invitation. I'm going to read my I am poem. It's how I introduce myself to a lot of spaces, because I believe it opens the door to some questions, and I always love questions. I am African by birth, American through naturalization. I am an immigrant forged from the hateful ideology of apartheid, tempered by the casual and relentless racism of the United States, joyfully and unapologetically indomitable. I am a torchbearer, a storyteller, a steward of knowledge. I am a woman, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a non-blood related auntie. I am a Tar Heel, a New Yorker, an opera singer, a logophile, a philanthropist. I am loved, cherished, privileged, angry. I am Donita Volkwijn.
Oh, thank you. Every time I hear this poem, I just am in awe, and especially as we've talked more about this, you and I, and many of us in this space, is the existence of so many dualities, that so many things can exist at the same time. And that's one of my favorite parts about hearing your stories, is that so many of these had to exist at the same time in order for us to be here and present. So thank you for starting
Yeah.
us off with this poem. And I want to talk a little bit about the well-being portion of this
Mm.
journey for you. And what that means is well-being can mean so many different things to so many people, so many different people. So, Donita, for you, as you even sat through writing this poem or sat with your journey, what does well-being mean to you?
I think first and foremost, it's acknowledging that we're all doing the best we can.
Mm,
Some days we have energy to do everything, and some days it is a struggle not to cry at every moment. Um, and I think the important thing is to find the well-being that works for you, kind of like your garden, Manuela, that you evoked for us. Not everybody's going to have the same garden. Not
mm,
everybody's going to want like a wild English garden. Some people are going to want an arid desert cactus, beautiful scenery with the sunset, you know. So well-being is what makes you well.
mm,
And I think that there are so many people who have voices in my head, wisdom that like that it lives in my head, and then I try and pass to my friends, to my colleagues. And I think recently I've been talking with some of my networks about the sense of urgency around everything. And I started to think about the fact that women of color especially have been pushed into a timeline that is not necessarily conducive to our well-being. This
mm,
urgency, this day to day, we have to get this done. What are your deliverables? Where like are you taking care of yourself? Are you taking care of your parents? Are you taking care of your kids? Are you taking care of your extended family? Like there's so much urgency. And I think one of the things that we are trying to accomplish is to extend our timeline. I think if we're talking about, especially as we start to talk about Juneteenth, um, having an eye to the past, being present in the future and dreaming what is being present in the present and dreaming what is in the future, all of that is exciting and joyful, and it's also very taxing.
mm,
I think if we hold a longer timeline within ourselves, the ability to be well is going to be a little bit easier. But it takes a different kind of thinking not to fall prey to that, like, got to get it done now. I want to be patient, and I want to be patient right now.
mm,
And the last thing I'll say about self care is that I don't think self care exists. Um, the only way to take care of self is by ensuring that there is a community that can hold you while you are absent for a minute from your life, from what ails you, from what struggles. We can't do this by ourselves. And if we set ourselves up to take care of everything ourselves, you know, self-care, self-reliance, self-worth, we set ourselves up for failure.
mhm,
Embrace the community that you have in order to have community care so that we all support each other as we aim to become or to stay well.
mm, mm. So much richness there. I love that because I think it connects to such I think a huge misconception or misleading concept that has been engraved in us around wellness and that is that you stand alone on this journey, right? It's what I hear you say, Donita, is something that we may not even acknowledge or are as aware of, I think, in a day to day, is that we are in relation to everything. Even if you are alone, you are never fully alone because you are always in relation to something. If it's not another human being, it is the space that you're in, it is the environment that you're in, it is nature, it is, if you have a pet or an animal, there is always something that we are in relation to. And when we can take a step back to acknowledge, like, we are always going to be part of something. And instead of pushing so much so against it, why don't we learn to embrace that and use that as a way to support our journey, and how community can be fundamental to our healing, to our evolving, to this work that we're doing. Thank you so much for naming and really grounding us in this notion of the power of community and the push against urgency. I love this longevity that you're talking about. And to what you said, it does go really perfectly into Juneteenth. And so let's start with that. I mean, Donita, I would love to talk to you about the Juneteenth and this day that we're existing in today. And let's talk a bit about your background and maybe the longevity, but also like the journey to this work with you and this day for you.
Thank you. Yeah. So, full disclosure, as my poem says, I was born in Cape Town, South Africa. So, I was not born on the soil of the United States. But when I was a kid, our family moved to very rural North Carolina, and moving from an apartheid. And for people who don't know what apartheid is, the South African government had a separation of races. So you were either black, white, or colored. And colored is anybody uh, who has no indigenous African blood, but is also not purely European. So as horrifying as that is, it gave certain categories. It was, it was helpful for us, because when I try and fill out race in the United States, I'm like, other, I don't know. But in living in rural North Carolina, and once we found out after we moved, thank goodness, that 5 years before our family moved to Oxford, North Carolina, there had been a modern day lynching of a Black man who had been accused of talking ugly to a white woman. That sort of, like, coming in as a person of color into this very stark black-white relationship, people decided I didn't get a say on how I was viewed. Some people thought I was white, some people thought I was black, some people just didn't think about me, which is fine. But the history of apartheid melded so beautifully ugly into the quote unquote post Jim Crow era of rural North Carolina in the 80s. I didn't even know about Juneteenth because, again, when you are in rural North Carolina getting an education that is meant for children of many different backgrounds, we don't hear the things that we need to look at and acknowledge ourselves. I didn't know about the Japanese internment until the 11th grade. I didn't know about, I knew about Nazis very early on because we could point a finger and say, oh, those are bad people. But we couldn't recognize those same strains of apartness that we were ourselves were sowing. I lived in a town that was like 5,000 people, 10,000 with the outlying areas. We had 20 churches, and they were all segregated by race, not by law, but by choice. Even in school, I would have the Black kids and the white kids would be separated. When I started off in school, I was neck and neck with my friend Galen as to who was the top of the class. And Galen was a young Black man, or he was a boy. We were children at the time. And by the time we left Oxford, I was in the accelerated classes and Galen was in the remedial classes. I don't know what shows the ravages of racism and the legacy of what happens when we don't have equity more than that story. My parents were, I had both of them. Yes, we were taken out of our country and put into this very weird little place. But Galen had a single mother who was not able to be there as much because she had to work a lot. And so the only thing that kept him from thriving as much as I was able to was his situation and the legacy of racism in the United States. And so Juneteenth, when I first learned about it, was very complex for me, because I was like, how in the world are people celebrating when they've been free for 2 years already and are only finding out now? How is that a celebration? I would be so mad. I'd be so angry, and I don't think I could let that go. And that's where the longevity comes in. That's where the generations coming in. Like, if you are alone now, your community can also be your ancestors or your progeny. You can look backwards and forwards. I remember when we were doing career pathways, there was an exercise where, so this is a program for leadership that was run by the Council on Foundations. And there was one day that the 24 participants were sitting around the table, and one of the leaders said, okay, now think about everybody that has brought you here to this moment and bring them into the room. And it's a little woo-woo, I know, but I like felt the room expand. It became crowded at the table because people were bringing in those family members, blood related or not, from generations ago, from yesterday, from tomorrow. And it was stunning. And that's what I think Juneteenth reminds us of doing, because think about it, like, now our news is instantaneous. Something happens on the other side of the globe and we know about it right now. For before cell phones, before television, before radio, you existed in a constant state of like Schrodinger's cat. You were, like, if you had family out in a war, or somebody was traveling, you were in a constant state of, I don't know what's happening with this person. And so there was so much trust that had to be built into how you handled things. When the folks in Galveston, Texas found out that they were free, I would imagine that this constant, like, being able to extend your trust throughout was probably initially, there were probably some people like me who were like, this is completely unacceptable that we have been free for 2 years and nobody told us. But that looking back into what this could hold for the future, what it meant for the children and the grandchildren of the people and the great grandchildren coming forward, that is something worth celebrating. Looking back to ancestors who had been born free, that is worth celebrating. And when I work at Philanthropy New York, and when we had our annual meeting a few weeks ago, one of our panelists asked about hope, and said, how many of us in this room, about 110 people in the room, how many people think that philanthropy can transform? And only 8 people raised their hands. And she said, ooh, this is what our problem is. We cannot let anyone steal our hope. And like, hope is problematic. Hope was in that box with all of the evils of the world. She is not somebody who is necessarily kind all the time. Hope can really destroy a person. But as we are in this time of upheaval, as difficult as it is, we have to hold on to hope. And that is what Juneteenth teaches us time and time again, is that in times of trouble, times of hurt, times of being unsettled, along the timeline of your history, there is some joy to be found. You know, like people say when they're having cocktails, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. You can find the same sort of, I'm having a horrible time, I'm having a horrible week, month, year, but somewhere along my timeline, there is joy. And I'm going to tap into it so that I do not give in to despair.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And this keeps coming back to us. Oof, thank you for starting us with this, really sincere reflection about the complexities of Juneteenth. And when I was saying we keep coming back to this is how we can acknowledge and see again those dualities and how so many of these things needed to happen in order for us to get to where we are. And I want to touch on a few of the things that you talked about because I'm hearing so many big topics that we can we can pull through. But I want to start with one of the big areas you started with. It's the when we exist in a system that lacks racial equity. With your story around you and Galen, and then also when you took us back to that day in Texas when when uh, folks heard about this news. And something that I was hearing earlier in the week as I was attending a great event about the history of Juneteenth, and I'll share that it's in the resource library.
Mm.
Um, Dr. Shauna hosted this conversation with some other wonderful speakers and one of the things that caught my attention was their acknowledgement of saying, well, people that joined that day and learned about this conversation, yes, maybe some were mad, some were celebrating, but what was real was then sitting with the aftermath of, okay, great, we know this, but now what? We don't have systems in place that are going to actually allow like this to be true, or how does this going to work? And I believe it was Professor Christopher on the call that said, so they sat there after the parents celebrated with the kids, they put the kids to bed, and then they sat there and looked around the corner with their partner and said, okay, so what do we do now, right? So my point is to go to the systems that you're mentioning of racial equity that need to be embedded. It's one thing to know about it. It's another thing for these practices, these beliefs to actually live, to actually prosper for people. And I mean, we bring it back to now, right? We see that it's not just then, it's we still see that happening. So I'm curious your thoughts around this and where you think how we acknowledge that and how we see that that very real complexity of this day.
Ooh, yeah. The there's a framework, the what, so what, now what? So what is
Mm,
the thing? So what do we reckon with? And now what? And the now what is, after Juneteenth, the previous slaves had no money, had nothing to call their own. So for a lot of the slaves, former slaves, they had to stay on the same land to which they had been shackled by slavery, and with the same people who had shackled them, and now try and find a way to have those people pay for the work they had done for free their entire lives. So, I was there are so many thoughts about systems. Our system, when you think about healthcare, education, banking, like financial stuff, our system was built to create and sustain inequity.
Mhm.
It works. Our system is not broken. Our system is doing exactly what it was set out to do. So,
Mhm.
in order to find a new system, you have to look at the what. What is the system? And that for that, you have to go into the past. David Daniels from the Bynum Family Foundation, he talks about what do we have to acknowledge about the past before we can move forward.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh my word, because you cannot schlep the entire past with you. You
Mhm.
My friend Ariane wrote about someone else's verbiage about dragging the carcass of racism into the future generations. It is a
Mhm.
carcass. What is happening right now is that the last breaths of patriarchy and racism are happening, but as with systems that are like all powerful,
Mhm.
as they collapse, they want to take us with them.
Mm.
And that's what we have to fight. So we have to look at the parts of the system that might work, right? There might be something in that if you strip it down to the studs, the steel framework might hold us up as we build something new.
Mm.
And recently, had a horrible thought and shared it with folks who also thought it was a pretty horrible thought. I was like, what what white dominant behaviors and thoughts do we have to hold on to, or do we choose to hold on to while we build the next thing? Because if
Mm.
you let go of the system completely, it also collapses, and then you have no framework from which to begin.
Wow.
So, like, as difficult as our past can be, as difficult as the next few months, years might be, we can't just say, all right, I'm out. Because once we do that, the system crumbles and
Mm.
we crumble along with it. So,
Mhm.
I kind of hate that, because it means like we hold so much all the time. All of us, Black, white, Native American, we're holding on to a lot of things. But for Indigenous folk, we're holding on to grief and pain while also holding on to an electric fence that other people can't necessarily see. And I'm like, I don't need you to like hold on to the fence for me, but I just need you to acknowledge that the fence is there, that I
Mm.
am being bombarded with different things than you might be being bombarded with.
Right.
So, like, you know, let me talk a little bit about mushrooms. Adrienne Marie Brown in her book talks about the magic of mushrooms.
Mm.
When New Orleans when was devastated by Katrina, there was a call for detoxifying the earth,
Mm.
and I think 22 people signed up, and each person was given or each company was given a square half mile something of earth to work with. And after everything, after the given time, um, there was one that had actually taken the toxins out of the earth, and it was mushrooms.
Interesting.
They just, the mushrooms not only took the poison out of the earth, but out of themselves as well. And I think that's what women of color are. As you know, we take other people's toxicity
Mm,
and transform it. But if there's too much toxicity, it overwhelms the system. And
right,
then not only do we as individuals collapse, the whole mushroom patch just is like, well.
right.
So what I think we need to work on is, if we are taking in other people's toxicity, the system's toxicity, how do we then transform that and make ourselves whole and not toxic anymore?
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
that can only be done in community.
Mm. I love that. Let's talk a little bit more about that because I think this is really the key of how the line that you're talking about, how we start moving forward, how with the respect and honoring the past, as you're mentioning, and also how we start to fertilize. We've talked about this
Mhm.
concept, right?
Yeah.
Um, and how we start, nurturing our soils, our grounds, so we can start to move forward. I love this concept of community. You've brought up hope, you've brought up trust. So where is your mind going in this evolution?
So, I do think that we have to overturn the earth to see what's embedded in there. Because if we try and sow seeds on a toxic soil, we are not only wasting our resources, we are giving in to, we lose our hope. Yeah. But unearthing what's buried very deep and is in the system, is in the blood work of the system, is not for the faint-hearted, and we
Mm,
can't do that by ourselves. So as we start to look at what has gone before, what could be happening in the future, that needs to be done in concert with whatever you consider to be your community. And then once, I mean, like, if you've ever had a moment of holding on to something that is hurtful or traumatic, and you then have a conversation or a practice that lets you unravel that and release it, the conversations, the practices are not easy. It's not easy to deal with what we have done to ourselves and each other. So there needs to be stamina that is created, and that again is done in community. Like, sometimes I can't hold all of my stuff, so I ask a friend, can you hold this for me? I'll trade you, I'll like hold some of your stuff too, because it's different muscles, right?
right.
um, but for a moment, I am able not to think about everything that is on me, and that's what community can do for you. But once you've released that feeling of freedom, that feeling of, oh my God, I'm so glad I did that, is that moment of celebration. And now you got a garden that you have to fix, or like start growing stuff, and you don't have any seeds. You don't know where your water source is. What are you going to do? I think one of the things, this is also from a woman who spoke the other day, from public welfare, Candace Jones, I'm not sure, amazing woman. Um, she said, in order for us to create the future, we have to think about the future in the, like, as the present.
Mm,
And I think for us, like, part of letting go of all of the hurt and the pain and the trauma allows us more space to dream and imagine something that we have not experienced.
mm.
Like, can you, I don't even know what a world without inequity would look like. I'm
Yeah.
not sure anybody has experienced that. So Like we have to put our dreaming, thinking, imagining stamina caps on in order for us to be like, you know what? I thought that maybe this garden would just be a couple of tulips, but maybe I want some chrysanthemums and little salamanders and worms in my garden as well, because I don't even know if those flowers work together. They might be toxic to each other. That's the other thing. Do your research so that you're not so
Got
that you're
planted
not
the wrong trees and mushrooms next to the other
so that
plant.
you're not working against yourself, right?
There we go. That's it.
Yeah. So I mean, I think going back to Juneteenth,
Yeah.
this is a day in which I think the only thing you need to hold yourself accountable to for is joy.
Mm.
Uh, If that joy means not doing anything, that's fine. You've been working, you've been doing this stuff. Give yourself a moment to rest. If that joy is, oh my gosh, it's 85 degrees outside. I love it so much. I want to go sweat. I want to do some mountain climbing. Do it. Take water. Um, but I think we put so much pressure on ourselves, again, to be well, to be whole, that we hold ourselves to ridiculous standards, and then we fail at the thing that's supposed to make us whole and well. What brings you joy? What can you celebrate? And what celebration can sustain you through the what's next? It can't be just like some random birthday party that is very surface and like, yay, happy birthday, bye. Um, well, it can be partially that. Let me not steal anybody else's joy. Um, but the true celebration comes from acknowledging what needs to be left behind and what needs to move forward.
Yes. Yes. And I just want to acknowledge we're getting love in the chat for you.
Oh,
Karan said, yes, joy to joy. Donita dropping wisdom today. Thank you,
hi, Karan.
Karan. We're so happy you're with us. Thank you. And I want to acknowledge what you're saying of I think this is the privilege as we hold as to be able to choose to do that. Not, and I want to encourage us as folks that are non-Black in this space, that then our responsibility on this day also to sit back and acknowledge and learn about that is that, you know, to be able to understand why, Black leaders do have every right to rest and be joyful and be anything that they choose to be on this day. And that's really the what we need to hold. I mean, I'll speak to me what I think is important. I think about on this day of how do I take myself out of the center and out of the ego to really think about us as a collective and what we've talked about. And so I want to acknowledge a few things, Donita, that you're saying that I think are really important that we don't hear a lot about, of the importance of what when you were saying like stepping into the future of what this could look like, because we have never seen it or witnessing it. In the work that I do, we talk about this being an embodiment, embodying that person, being that person when we are wanting to create something we've never seen, because it is scary and it is hard to imagine something when everything around you has told you that it's not possible, right? I really want to emphasize that. But bigger than that, I want to emphasize what you were mentioning around the trauma and the importance of healing, because something that I have learned that I think is I hadn't heard before is to be creative, to be dreaming, to be in the strategic going. If our bodies and our nervous systems aren't regulated, if we're not giving ourselves if we're not feeling like our foundation is okay, then we can't even get there. So again, this all goes to the way we're talking about these topics are very broad because it just can vary so much depending on where your journey are. So if you're still someone that is really in a crisis or really trying to even understand and maybe like reflect and understand a lot of what's happening here, it's okay for you to right now to just sit with to learning and to feeding that joy maybe that Donina's calling you into, or finding what is it that you need to feel okay, and then and then we can go out and push and be creative and change and imagine those systems. But that's something of like where those dualities sit, of like where is that line of how to push forward in that work. And we had another comment here that said, so powerful, the concept of being in relation and being in community. Oh, here, I'll put it in the chat. From Angela, so powerful, the concept of being in relation and well-being in community. It is making me wonder about the pervades belief that well-being is always about retreating. This is opening something for me around the idea of retreats and the value and misperceptions about retreating. Thank you. Absolutely. And that's what, the I love, Donita, you've continued to bring us into this, the power of community, the power of us coming together. And I think this goes really nicely into the last area we wanted to talk about, which was our organizations, right? A lot of folks that we call into these conversations are organizational leaders, organizations leaders that are trying to figure out how to incorporate these types of concepts, these beliefs, these understandings into these cultures and within their organization. So we've talked a bit about the individual responsibility we hold on this day, and to honor, to acknowledge, to learn, to know what your role is and what others' roles are. But as a collective, Donita, what do you think the organization's responsibility is to this work and to honoring, Juneteenth, maybe starting there?
Um, oh my gosh. First of all, don't put up a bunch of words
Mm,
um, that mean nothing. Um, your point about who needs, like, how people find their joy being different. Let's be clear. I mean, like, look at the medical system for Black folks in America.
mhm,
Um, Somebody's joy might be being able to take Juneteenth and go to the doctor because they
mm,
finally have health insurance. But even going to the doctor is not necessarily the safe thing to do in the United States if you are a Black person.
mhm,
Um, for organizations, like, do your research and be in conversation with the community that you're serving. Celebrations are going to look different for different people. For some people, I mean, Angela, like, I I need to retreat because I get overwhelmed by things. But it is a retreat so that I can, like, bring myself the energy back to come into the group, to come into the celebration, to come into the community. So it's not about like constantly being with other people. Your place in community is different. For organizations, first of all, understand what the complexities of what this brings up for Black people in America, because we are being asked to celebrate while our civil liberties are being taken away from us one after the other. And celebrating in the face of trauma is is one of the superpowers of the Black community in the United States. Celebrating through the pain, celebrating through the trauma, celebrating through the hurt. Eventually, I am hoping it just becomes celebrating because we have worked our way through those things. Organizations who try to decide how people should celebrate, what people should do with their time, are not helping. If you are, I learned this from Blackish. If you, for Martin Luther King Jr. Day and for Juneteenth, as a Black person, you know, like your first rule is to like go do nothing and don't think about the history of the United States. Don't think of, like, just be free, because that's what everybody has been fighting for, and that's what you've been fighting for too, right? So like, if you have no Black people in your organization, first of all, think about that. Maybe make some
Right.
better life choices. But if you don't have any Black people in your organization, celebrate Juneteenth regardless, because it is adding your voice, adding your acknowledgement into the discussion. Maybe get some reading materials for folks who don't know the history, and that will include Black people, because it's been hidden from us. Our past has been, in the truest sense of the word, whitewashed, because you know, folks don't want to acknowledge what has gone on before. So unearth some of those things that are uncomfortable. Offer to have a conversation. Understand if people don't want to have a conversation, because that's what, like, what is the word? Caucusing is about. When you caucus into different races or different genders or different levels of an organization, it's not about creating more separation. It is about preparing in smaller groups that have affinity to each other, preparing to come back into the larger conversation. What do you need? For Black people, a lot of times it's going to be healing. It's going to be laughter. It's going to be something that we that maybe shoring up our voices so that we are heard. For white people, it can be dealing with the guilt and the shame that comes along with unearthing the things in our past. For brown people, or people who are not, you know, people who are allies, not white allies, it can be about recognizing the same kinds of things that have happened in your past and finding bridges to build. It is not an easy conversation, and you can't just spring these things on folks and be like, okay, we're going to have a conversation and that's how we're going to honor Juneteenth. Prepare.
Oh my gosh, so rich. And I think what I just sitting in it, just the fact that it goes where we started, this push against the urgency to not feel like you need to run to do something. But really, what I hear consistently and what you're calling organizations into is not trying to make one size fits all, but actually just listening to what folks may need and giving the space to be in the gray, be in the messiness, be in the figuring it out.
Be in
So
the wobble of
be
it
in the
all.
wobble.
Yeah.
Yes, Donita, thank you so much. We are coming to the end of our conversation. I want to ask you before we hop off, because this is so important to hear from everyone of our guests. Living a life con fuerza is about reclaiming our inner power to live in alignment with our values. How are you choosing to live a life con fuerza, or what does living a life con fuerza with strength mean to you?
Strength is about being strong enough to bend,
Mm,
because a lot of us think of strength as something that is immovable, immutable. Strength for me means being able to withstand the ups and downs of things, and finding my inner power. My parents have instilled in me this core of self-worth that no one's ever going to touch, really. But there are other things that I can hear that might wobble me a little bit. If you have a strong enough root system, your wobbles can be absorbed by that system. Find ways to bend.
I love that. I love that. Had seen this, someone had shared the power of a bamboo is its ability to bend and come back. And it's not just about resistance, but being able to flow through the different circumstances that be. That's what the strength of bamboo and so much. And oh, thank you so much, Donita. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being so present. I want to acknowledge time. I do want to share a few updates from Confuerza before we jump in. And so, Donita, if you have a few minutes to stay with us, we would love that. But if you need to hop off, I completely respect and understand that. Before we do, I just once again want to thank you so much for being here. We knew this was going to happen. The time went by too fast. We have so much to talk and share about. But what's great is that Donita has done a wonderful job at share her additional resources. She has a wonderful website and is growing her presence on Instagram to share more of this wisdom consistently. So please connect with her. On our resource library page, you'll see that there are a lot of resources around Juneteenth, how to educate yourself, how to get involved, other people that are doing programs to really honor and support this day fully, and what other ways you can continue to learn and engage with yourself. I want to briefly share my screen because I have a few exciting announcements that I know I've shared with people about. So I want to briefly just share. Let's see if it allows me. There we go. Oh, excuse me. I am having
This is the beauty of live theater,
There we
right?
go. Yes. So, as all of you were able to witness today, this was the start of our summer series. We have a series of incredible guests that are going to be joining us today for the next few weeks consistently. We have Mark Travis Vivera, who's going to be talking to us next week about reframing narratives that are no longer serving us. We have journalist and author, emotional health coach Leslie Rengal, who's going to be talking about managing our mind through the news cycle as we enter election year coming up in this fall, and how many of us are already feeling it. And connecting to something Donita just we ended with, the resilience. We have Asente Rene, who is the founder and Chief Wellness Officer of Exxon Group. She's going to be talking about this incredible movement about retiring the superwoman, actually really questioning this resilience that we are consistently upholding for Black women. So I welcome you and ask you to join us again on these next following Wednesdays for us to engage in these conversations. And a really special announcement. The consistent theme of our conversation today is community. And so I'm really excited to launch the Nurturing Space community. This is going to be a WhatsApp community where all of you, I've gotten a lot of feedback that these conversations are great, but I'm having trouble knowing where to find them. I want to talk more about it. There's just so much about it. So this is for you. I created a WhatsApp community where you can join. We'll be getting updates about all the events so you know where to go all in one place. And we'll be having different groups. So we'll have one group that's all about getting updates about all of these live conversations. The second group, which is going to be a space to reflect, to just sit with everything that we hear about on these conversations. I'm going to be launching the alignment and connection circles, which is going to be a live conversation in a Zoom meeting where we'll be able to get together and through a restorative justice framework, be able to just sit and talk about what we're all hearing and how we can understand and navigate this for ourselves. And then to really close that circle, then the last group is around aligned action. So we're all figuring it out. That is what it's the theme here. We're all figuring it out, and there is no one way to do it. So let's imperfectly work on figuring it out together. And so in this last group, you'll be able to share your journey, hold yourself accountable, share with other people that are also on this journey and trying to find how to pursue our passion and also preserve our well-being. We'll be doing aligned action co-working sessions where you can come and just work together. And in those working sessions, we'll be able to practice other activities and practices that will help us preserve and value and prioritize our well being. So I'll share the link here. Scan this QR code so you can go ahead and register. And I am just really excited to see where this next evolution of Con Fuerza and these nurturing spaces take us. So thank you for those of you who stayed on to hear the announcement and to join us. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I appreciate y'all for being here. Thank you again, once again, Donita, for joining us in community and calling us in to so much deep reflection. A big, big hug to all of you, and I will see you next Wednesday. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Manuela.